Good morning. Welcome back. It's Sarah from Roadworthy. Forgive my voice. I'm recovering from a cold. If I don't need to blow my nose during this video, that'll be great. Definitely having a cold impacted my reading. Probably in good ways. It is 7:30 this morning here, so it's a little chilly. I'm wearing a jacket, and I'm in my local park, and I sort of forgot how many people are jogging through, walking through, biking through, you know. So we'll see how this goes. I do feel really strange sitting here talking into a camera in a public space. Anyway. We were at the coast this weekend, which was lovely, or the coast during the week, I should say. It was lovely. I was going to film some things, and then I thought, I don't know, because what did we, there was lots of dead creatures on the beach. Tons and tons of crabs, which is expected. Ate like a flatfish, like a floundery fish. A dead skate, which was fascinating, but there was a dead whale. So there had been a juvenile 56-foot fin whale beach itself up there. It did get an autopsy that it was dying of malnutrition when it beached itself. And what's fascinating is they did not remove it from the beach. So it beached itself in November, and here it is, the end of July, and there's still a carcass on the beach. It was shockingly not as gross as I was expecting it to be. It was kind of fascinating. You could see like its spine and stuff. I was going to film it, and then I thought, oh my God, I better not. Because that might gross some people out. But anyway, it's fascinating. Lots of things this year on the beach. And then tomorrow, we are leaving to head up to Vancouver Island to kayak for 5 days, I think, for our wedding anniversary. So that'll be nice. And we're very excited. So let's see, we take the ferry over into Victoria, and I'm very excited to meet Lindy in person. And we'll spend a couple hours together in Victoria, seeing the sights, and then we've got a 5-hour drive up Vancouver Island to head towards the meeting spot for launching and taking off. So what did I read? What did I finish? So first thing was The Maniac by Benjamin Labutat. I'm going to put this down because I feel completely weird holding a book up as people are wandering by, running, walking their dogs, etc. This is a book told in 3 parts. The first, maybe 25%, is a portrait of Paul Ehrenfest, who was a physicist in 1930s Germany. And the opening paragraph tells you that Ehrenfest in 1933 shot his, I think, 11-year-old son, who was in an institution with Down syndrome, and killed himself. Oh my God, that was a loud crow. Um, Out of increasing fear and paranoia about what the Germans would do to his son. So he shot his son. He was good friends with Einstein and Niels Bohr and other prominent physicists of the day. And it sounds like he sort of played this role of mediator and helping them think through their ideas. Anyway, and then it sort of gives this portrayal of a man who was profoundly depressed and like I said, increasingly paranoid as the Nazis were rising to power. The second part of the book, which was probably maybe 50% of the book, is a portrait of Johnny von Neumann, who was a mathematician and a super interesting guy. He was involved as a consultant for the Manhattan Project, as well as other numerous sort of defense-related projects that aren't really ever outlined in the book. He published the first book on game theory. So one of the quips in the book is that he wrote the book, what was it called? Game Theory and Economic Behavior, the most important and least read book in economics. Developed a very early computer called the Maniac. And then he got very interested in the idea of self-replicating machines um, and theorized that about artificial intelligence. From a book perspective, his section is written where each chapter is written from a different person. So it could be written from his wife, his daughter, colleague, critic. And so you get this myriad of voices portraying this person. And sometimes they contradict each other. And they can sometimes create this sort of confusing portrait. And I think in some ways it works because it sort of reflects people's perceptions that he was difficult and confusing and complicated. The third half of the book is about really artificial intelligence and oh god, Deep Blue, which was the IBM computer created to beat Gary Kasparov in chess. And then so it goes through that, and then it talks about AlphaGo, the computer that was developed to play Go. That section really read like narrative nonfiction, and I think part of it is, the engineers didn't know what it was doing, right? They were just like, it's doing its thing. It's doing what it's supposed to. It's teaching itself. Can't really describe it or can't really say why it did this move or that move. And then the Go players themselves, they spoke at press conferences, but they never really talked about the game so there's very little documentation to create a more interesting narrative. So again, it does come off as very narrative nonfiction. I really enjoyed this book. I'm not sure the three different parts necessarily worked as a cohesive unit. I really could have just stuck with the Johnny von Neumann part all by itself. But I'm also super interested in the history of science and math and technology. I will say some people, when you talk about climate change, for example, some people are like, oh, you know what, let's not worry about it because we'll come up with a technological solution. So they're very hopeful about the use of technology to get us out of our problems. I would say Labutat is on the other side of that technology got us into these problems, and perhaps we need to be thoughtful about what we're doing. So this book ends and feels very much like a warning. I finished listening to The Strange and Eventful History by Claire Messud. This is very much a book based on her family's history. But it starts in World War II when the Germans invade France. They are a French Algerian family. So they're ethnically French, but they have lived in Algeria, their family, for I think it was like 100 years or something. So we follow this family through World War II, right, as the family ends up going back to Algiers. And then we follow this family through the 2010s, I think. So we see the children grow up into adults. We see them have children. We see them become grandparents. And so what's interesting is obviously Algeria becomes independent at that point in time, and they're thrown out of their country, what they perceive as their country. During as they're sort of trying to make their way in the world, and returning to France, working for French companies, different things, you realize, well, they're obviously not accepted by, the Berber Algerians, but they're looked down upon as from the French too, so they're not really considered French, because they're from a colony. And so they don't really belong in Algeria, they don't really belong in France, and you sort of see this family wandering the world in a lot of ways, trying to make their way, trying to be respectable, trying to be fit in. So there's a lot about identity, language, culture, nationality. It's interesting to read a book about colonizers when they're just sort of swept up in the tides of history. I feel like oftentimes when you read books about colonization, you're hearing it from the colonized perspective, or you're hearing it from the colonizer perspective, but people who are actively doing the colonizing. This is just your middle class family who just happens to live in Algeria. So that was interesting. That's sort of what appealed to me about this book. But honestly, it was too long, and the pace was a bit slow. I think it was 17 hours in an audiobook, and that was just too long for this sort of a family drama. So it was somewhat interesting. So then that's the point where I was then really sick, and I did end up with a fever, and I think it was a cold, but anyway. And I read the Perfume by Patrick Suskind. This is kind of the perfect book to be reading when I was sick and not really focused. This book is about Jean-Baptiste Grenouille, who was born in Paris in 1738. And he doesn't smell. He has no odor. And he has an incredible, supernatural sense of smell. I think really this book is more of a what would happen to a guy who had an incredible nose, who doesn't smell, living in an incredibly smelly time. What would happen? So Suskind spends a lot of time at the beginning of this book describing the smells of Paris, the decay, the rot, the filth, the manure, and our Jean-Baptiste is orphaned, and he ends up working in a tannery, very smelly job. He then decides to become a perfumer. And so we sort of see his journey learning the perfume industry. And then I don't want to give anything away. So I'm not sure how I'm going to describe the horror aspect of this, but I'll just say that he ends up killing people for their scent. Now, this book was written in 1985. Yes, and I should have said, it was written in German and was translated by Hamish Hamilton. So this is 40 years old? I feel like there was no larger message here in this book. I feel like more contemporary body horror novels that I've read sort of are making a social point about what we do for beauty, or whereas this, like I said, really felt like a thought experiment. And so it wasn't that interesting as a novel. It was, like I said, kind of the perfect thing while I was sick. It very plot heavy. I mean, it was well written. I mean, I don't want to say
it's a bad book, but it's not a book for me. I'm much more interested in the themes and characters, and that really wasn't this book's focus. This book was really what would happen if, and very plot heavy. So that's kind of what I finished. And so I am currently listening to Whalebone Theater by Joanna Quinn, Annibot by Sierra Greer. That's it. So wish me luck as I head out to go kayaking. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Hope you all are doing well. And yeah, catch you next week.